A good chunk of it is a combination of hard seltzer and more efficiencies on advertising spending on hard seltzer specifically.
So explain how that gets the valuation of Boston Beer up to $1,000 a share.
Certainly. So historically, Boston Beer Company has spent close to 30% of revenues on advertising and promotional expense. If you benchmark that to some of their key competitors like the Miller Coors business, the number 2 beer business in the United States, or the Constellation's beer business, the number 3 beers business in the United States, they're spending close to 3 times as much as their peers historically. What we saw in the second quarter was advertising and promotional expense fell dramatically to 22.2% of sales. That was down over 700 basis points. And that's a record low for the company. And what the CFO said on the call was they think about advertising spending in absolute dollars going forward as opposed to a percentage of sales, which really does set the company up for a lot of operating leverage on that SG&A line item, given the very robust top line growth you're seeing on hard seltzer.
But it's interesting to hear you basically say you think they're going to spend less of their sort of balance sheet going forward on advertising and promotions, and that's a good thing. I mean, a lot of companies who have experimented with that in the past have found out that they lose market share as a result.
Oh, well, I would certainly not advocate cutting to the bone. To put these numbers in context, Constellation Brands targets 9.5% to 10% of sales in terms of beer advertising spending. So even our estimate for next year at 21.5% of sales has them hitting well above the peer group benchmark. And importantly, in absolute dollar terms, we still have their quarterly advertising spending growing about 7% into next year.
Is the hard seltzer a fad, Vivian?
You know, if you had asked me that a year ago, I would have said maybe. But the evolution of the category over the last 12 months makes me think no. What's interesting as we reflect back on why this category has over a 10% share of total beer is why it resonates so much with consumers under the age of 35, where over 30% of them report drinking hard seltzer. And we basically think this is the generation that grew up with LaCroix, and this is now sparkling water with alcohol.
Vivian, let me ask you about what's going on with some of the cannabis stocks, which you also cover. What names do you think are a buy and why?
Sure. So we have a bias towards the U.S. multi-state operators, and our favorite name in the United States is Green Thumb Industries. We also have outperform ratings on Cresco Labs and Curaleaf. If you look at the growth that we saw quarter over quarter in calendar QQ for the good operators, it was ranging between mid-teens and as high as 42% for Cresco, who reported last Thursday. So clearly this category has not lost any steam with COVID, and in fact is showing its resiliency. As we look ahead, we do think the election could be a very meaningful catalyst for the industry in the U.S.
What litigation change are you looking forward to real quickly?
From a regulatory standpoint, there are certainly ballot initiatives that we're watching out for. New Jersey and Arizona, the most important in terms of adult use. That's catalyst number 1. Catalyst number 2 is going to be legislative change at the state level, COVID budget gap filling. Certainly there are a number of states in the Northeast that we would be watching out for, New York, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. And then come November 3rd, we feel high conviction that if the Democrats take the Senate, we will see federal policy change.